Game Week 1 has just passed in the Premier League, and here's a recap of the scores. We'll be doing this in reverse order. Spurs, unfortunately for me, were held to a 1-1 draw at the King Power Stadium, and maybe they were actually lucky to get away with a draw. The title contenders in Manchester City, Arsenal and potentially Liverpool all went to comfortable, quote unquote, 2-0 wins. The relegation contenders, that being Ipswich, Leicester and Southampton, having just come up, all were, as mentioned, either beaten, unlucky to go 1-0 down to a 10-man Newcastle, or, as mentioned, were beaten 2-0 by Liverpool. Manchester United managed to keep a 1-0 win over Fulham at home, and the result of the week was probably the 3-0 drubbing that Everton got from Brighton, putting them, I would say, squarely in the relegation battle. We'll start by discussing the match of the week, which is a new section I'm making on this show. The match of the week will be a match every single week where I feel like that match has had the most impact. This could be because of drama, could be because of narratives or effects going forward in the title or relegation battle. It could be a tight fought win, a tight fought loss, a draw with high scores, or just the tension and drama it built up. It could even be because of VAR. What it is this week is Chelsea carrying on their chaotic preseason with a chaotic first match and the narratives coming forwards from it. I would say Chelsea has taken over as the banter club in the Premier League. This was a title held for a long time by Arsenal, with their constant crying about not winning any trophies, lack of progression, and players coming there to essentially go out to pasture. This is now seemingly Chelsea's role, although they've done it in a new way of signing 35 players somehow over a summer transfer window and playing almost none of them. I'm going to show you a graphic right now. Take a look at this team and what do you notice about it? What's a common thing about it? No, you're wrong. This is a full team of 11 that have some form of drama around the Chelsea squad and didn't feature at all in their 2-0 loss to City. It's surprising, isn't it? You'd have thought that with squad depth being such an important thing, you wouldn't want a full team of 11 of potentially first team players and players who have been champions or have been first team players for Chelsea. To make a full team of that is quite impressive, would you not say? In this squad, you've got players such as Sterling or Mudryk, their wingers, who are off form and have had statements had to be put out saying that they're focusing on their path going forwards, and seemingly either going to be a black hole of wages, not playing, such as Sterling on £350,000 a week and off form apparently, or Mykhailo Mudryk, who can't string 2 passes to save his life. You also have on this list players who are shunned and clearly Clearlake wants to sell for a profit, such as Petrovic, who had actually a reasonable season last season, and Chalobah, who's an academy graduate and under Pochettino led them to an unbeaten run towards the end of the season, cementing them a 6th place finish. These two are being ousted and weren't taken on a preseason tour for some reason, despite being the best defender and arguably the best keeper they've got. You've got players who have or are being sold, such as Broja, who was loaned out to Fulham and seems to be being sold or peddled to whoever will take him, and Gallagher, who's finally completed his move to Atletico Madrid. The way he was treated is actually quite despicable. Gallagher was made to fly back and forth between Madrid and England and stay in various hotels waiting for the outcome of this contract battle. It seems like Chelsea isn't taking care of one of their homeboys. I would say that's pretty despicable as a club. You have players who can't remain uninjured for their life, who would be surprised that Reece James is once again injured and will be missing for a significant portion of the season again. I'm unsure why Chilwell didn't play a part, but I would suspect that he's probably not up to speed and his form has been waning ever since he's picked up a couple of injuries. You've got Lukaku, who's the perennial contract chaser and is basically going around all the Serie A clubs apparently, who are still somehow being paid for by Chelsea. Even on their bench, you can see that they've got Badiashile and Kepa, who is doing a Lukaku and essentially costing Chelsea money whilst not actually playing for them. If you do a search of Chelsea Football Club 2-3 years ago, you would be looking at title battles, winning the Champions League, and what they'll be doing in the season coming. Sterling was part of that process. He was one of the initial signings that indicated change at Chelsea, and that they weren't happy with not winning any silverware and they were going to try to change their squad. Hiring Pochettino, although difficult for me to watch as a Spurs fan, was also a positive sign. A coach who was well known to bring up young talent, and despite having some difficulty and some loyalty issues, and I'm looking at you, Rory Jennings, who was shouting for Pochettino's head all of last season and somehow is now decrying his departure. Somehow, towards the end of the season, Pochettino managed to get Chelsea into 6th, above Manchester United and Newcastle, despite all his troubles. And yet, strangely, over the summer, he mutually parted with Chelsea Football Club, and I think we can see why. Everything that Rory Jennings has mentioned in his videos that Clearlake and Bowley want to do seems to be happening, doesn't it? Very much so. Your academy graduates are all being sold. We're talking about Mason Mount to Manchester United, Chalobah, who seemingly is being ousted, Petrovic, and Conor Gallagher, who's just been sold to Atletico. This is a list of players that represent the heart and soul of Chelsea. Players who would die for the badge, but clearly the badge will not die for them. In fact, the badge will kick you out and make you stay in a hotel waiting for whatever contract negotiations need to. It's not surprising that players are finding it difficult to find form. Chelsea have also had 6 managers over the past 2 years. That's basically a new manager every 4 months. Do you think that there was any chance of any stability happening at Chelsea? You've got Enzo Maresca, who, despite Gary Neville's podcast saying that he's representing a new change and the ownership has clearly hired him because of his style, and, well, what happened? Because in pre-season he was very much all guns blazing, I'm going to stick to my style. And yet against Manchester City, all of that seemed to go away. What's happened, Enzo? It seems like Enzo Maresca is going to perhaps get a win here and there just by quality of squad and reputation of Chelsea, but genuinely against actual high-level players and high-level clubs, I think Chelsea are going to falter, and Maresca is going to find out very soon that he's not the manager you think he is. I mean, the whole league has gotten used to playing against Pep Guardiola full fat. I think they're going to manage Pep Guardiola light in Enzo Maresca fairly easily. And it's not just players off the pitch that were made memeable. I put out a short recently of Cucurella, who, having, congratulations to him, won the Euros, decided that he was going to banter Haaland and say Haaland will tremble. And in fact what happens is Haaland steamrolled past Cucurella and pushed him to the ground while scoring a goal to open up his account for this season. I think this is very much a Vardyism of chat shit, get banged. Speaking of Manchester City, although it very much seems like business as usual winning comfortably 2-0 against Chelsea away, I would suggest that there were some weaknesses and potential gaps were there to be an injury, let's say to Rodri, for example, and they are reinforcing quite vigorously. It seems like Gundogan's about to come back through the door, and Barcelona's financial troubles, which is a whole video in and of itself, seems to be catching up with them, and they're going to let Gundogan go back on a free to Manchester City. Gundogan, I think, will have a solid presence in Manchester City's system. He's played under Pep for a long time. He's won under Pep. He knows what Pep wants. He can play everywhere. He's a senior presence, and I think the rest of the Premier League needs to be scared if this transfer is completed. Moving on to silver medal for the past 2 seasons, Arsenal. I must admit I'm quite impressed by Arsenal's performance this season, albeit against a rather underpowered Wolves team, who are still looking to reinforce. They won 2-0 relatively comfortably, and Saka looks like a continuing bright spark, continuing his Euros form. Say what you want about him in the Euros, he had energy to spare and was one of England's bright sparks, providing a lot of attack down that right wing when we weren't being shut down. Sorry, England fans. However, Arsenal should be judged on their season and not the start of their season. I'm not surprised that Saka has a bright start to the season, but my ongoing concern with Arsenal remains the same. Who's the backup to Saka? If Saka gets injured, who'd you put there? Certainly you don't want to put Havertz there. He doesn't have the speed or the ingenuity, and I don't think Trossard plays there naturally. So I think Arsenal are still looking to reinforce in that area, unless they're just going to play Saka all season again. And I'm not so worried about an injury to Saka, more the amount of gameplay that he's forced to do at such a young age is going to break him. And Arteta will be falling into the same trap that Arsene Wenger got into, which is basically breaking down his squad from the inside out by overplaying them and not giving them enough rest. Arsenal have a long campaign ahead of them. They're looking to go deep in Europe, which they've not done for a long time, and they didn't do last season, having been taken out by a rather underpowered Bayern Munich team. So what's the plan here? Are we going to look for a replacement? Are we going to get a replacement? Because it doesn't look like Arsenal are doing that. Questions to be answered for sure. Whilst for Wolves, I would say let's move past this and let's see what you manage next week. Ipswich returned to the Premier League for the first time in 22 years, and they gave a spirited account of themselves, despite going down 2-0. They held Liverpool for a good hour, and I would say Liverpool have a few questions to answer under Arne Slot's system. I must admit, I'm not very sure that Arne Slot will take Liverpool as far as people think and give them a comfortable third place finish. I think he will be struggling towards the end of the season, especially with problems such as squad depth. Liverpool this transfer window have made pretty much no signings at all, and they seem to be chasing a backup to the backup of Alisson in goal, in Georgian superstar Mamoudzashvili. I'm sorry if I butchered that, I haven't had time to practice. But given that they already have a solid, perhaps arguably the best keeper in the Premier League and the world in Alisson, and a pretty reasonable replacement in Kelleher, who they haven't sold yet, I think looking for a third keeper is not the priority for Liverpool right now. I would suggest perhaps getting a bit more of a midfielder to provide a bit more of a six presence, perhaps a right back so Trent can transition into that role, or any number of other positions, a backup to Salah for example, would need to be prioritised over a third keeper. And good old Spurs, disappointing me once again. I watched this game in its entirety live, and I must say, there are some bright sparks that we can take out of this. But at the end of the day, it's a results game. And the result is, we had a million chances and scored one. Leicester, up until their goal, had no chances and then had loads. I must admit, the fire that Vardy showed and the passion and the shithousery that was going on was very much reminiscent of why I think Leicester was going to end up perhaps 14th or 15th, but comfortably in safety. They look like a Premier League side to me. They've got some creative sparks, Ndidi looks fresh, and their wingers seem to have a lot of energy. It's tough to be on the receiving end of something like this, but as a Spurs fan, I must say, looking at how we played, there was a couple of moments of inexperience, I would say, from Bergvall, but the fact that Bergvall and Archie Gray got minutes in the first game of the season, Dominic Solanke was in the box a lot, and Heung-min Son out on the wings alongside Brennan Johnson, I would say we played quite well and we created a multitude of chances. It's just those chances need to go in at some point. What I really liked about Spurs last season was that we were a very attacking focused team who really had one or two touch finishes in the box. We didn't waste time in the box. However, we seem to be reverting to this old Arsenal pattern of trying to create the perfect goal of passing, and I've saw 3, 4, 5 touches in the box. That's not Ange ball as far as I know. From what I understand, Ange ball is get the ball in the box to dangerous areas and have your finishers finish the goal. I don't understand what's happened in this game, perhaps nerves, perhaps first game of the season, but I expect this to be better, because if we don't get better, this is going to be pretty tough and a pretty rough season for us. Perhaps those predictions of Spurs not making even the top 6 might be coming true, and I really can't stand that. Newcastle scraped their way to a 1-0 win over Southampton. I think this is quite telling in Southampton's story. Being unlucky, creating chances, not putting them away against Premier League opposition, especially against a 10-man side. Those are games you really need to win if you want to survive this season. Newcastle were vulnerable, and I would say a lack of solid signings has played into that. I don't think Newcastle, unless they get some reinforcements, and the fact that Tonali is coming back at the end of the month, having served his gambling ban, are looking very good for top 4 this season, and I think they need to pick up. However, being down to 10 men and coming away with a win is always difficult, especially in the Premier League, and credit to Newcastle for doing so. And I think it's all hands on deck for Everton fans. Going 3-0 down to Brighton at home is difficult, especially in your final season at Goodison Park. You need to make memories, and your memories don't need to be we were relegated in that stadium. Goodison Park has been your home, your fortress, and you guys need to really pick up your ideas. You can't be going down 3-0. Goal difference could make a difference in this relegation battle, and this early in the season, I think puts you guys squarely in the relegation battle. And now looking ahead to game week 2 and giving my predictions. We've got Brighton, Manchester United, with United seemingly away. I would say that's going to be a pretty tough match. Manchester United pretty much scraped to win and have already got a significant injury list, whereas Brighton looked bright in their 3-0 win over Everton. I think this will be difficult for United, and actually they don't historically have good results against Brighton. I think it might be a 3-1 win to Brighton. Crystal Palace versus West Ham. Despite having a very active transfer window and seemingly doing all the right moves, I'm not that impressed by West Ham. A 2-1 loss to Aston Villa is nothing to be ashamed of, but I do think that Crystal Palace, although having some transfer rumours around their team, are a bit more solid right now. I think it might be a 2-1 win to Crystal Palace. I think Fulham versus Leicester City might be one of the scraps of the season. We've seen that Jamie Vardy is up for it for this season, and we know that Fulham have been making some clever transfer moves this transfer window. I think that this might come out to a 2-2 draw. The rich keep getting richer in the next matchup, with Manchester City hosting Ipswich Town. I don't think they're going to present much, and I think this is a chance for Manchester City to really build on their goal difference. I'm thinking 3-4-0 Manchester City, perhaps 4-0. We've got Southampton Forest, one of the matches of the bottom of the table, and I would suggest that Southampton might be able to eke out a 1-1 draw with Forest. I have to have faith in the boys, and I believe Spurs will beat Everton. I think it might be a 3-1 win. We're at home, and Everton have just come off a drubbing. That might reinforce them, but I don't think so, especially not away from home. The next was Arsenal's slip-up from last season in Villa. I think Villa at home, having not had to play any Champions League football just yet, and a fresh squad, might be able to win this 2-1. With a red card to one of their starting centre-backs, I think Newcastle might struggle against Bournemouth, who surprisingly show quite good form against top sides. I suggest that Bournemouth might be able to win this 2-1. Perhaps this is the side of me that doesn't like Chelsea, but I am hoping that Wolves can show Chelsea what's what, having sold Neto to them, and I don't think Neto will play too well against his former club. And I'm hoping Wolves pull off a 1-0 win against Chelsea. And Liverpool against Brentford. This might be a test for Arne Slot, but I think Liverpool actually come away with this quite comfortably and have a 3-0 win. Let me know what you guys think will happen this weekend. What do you think of my analysis? And what do you think of Chelsea as a club this season? Are they the new Banter FC? Comment down below, and peace.